everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are going to be doing something I have been quite reluctant to do on my channel. We are going to be reacting to hate comments, and listen, this is just part of being a YouTuber, or frankly anybody online. You're gonna get people that have very strong opinions about the topics you're covering, how you're saying certain things, what you don't say, and people really want to make sure that you personally as a creator know what they think about your content. And having been on the internet now for 7 or 8 years, I have quite the backlog of zinger comments of people just like really laying into me, and I thought it might be educational, entertaining, informational, I don't know, I hope that's what this ends up being, to just go through these hater comments and respond to them, maybe clear up some misconceptions, or just, I don't know, maybe we'll just have a fun time together at the very least. And let's go ahead and get into it. This is the first hate comment. And this one says, wearing a collar makes you less than. That's my opinion. Now this comment is from the video I did earlier this year talking about why I no longer wear a collar. And that video got so much engagement, just like across the board, but there are a lot of very cutting comments in that video. Like I got one that I didn't actually pick for this video that was basically it sounds like you care too much about what other people think. Guess collars aren't for you. Like smiley emoji. Like there's a level of passive aggressiveness to certain comments that I kind of appreciate, but this one is just very direct. This one's like, listen, if you wear a collar, you're just lesser. And I find that to be very funny because on the one hand, I kind of want to respond and be like, I mean, that's what being a submissive is about. We want to feel lesser than. Thanks, we've achieved our goal. But also, on a more direct, non-sarcastic level, I do want to say that, of course, that's silly. Wearing a collar or not doesn't mean anything about your value as a person any more than wearing a raincoat or galoshes would. It's a very personal choice about your style and how you choose to represent your relationship. Of course, that doesn't really matter. There are people who are all across the spectrum of personality that wear collars, and they are all equally valid and beautiful individual human beings, and also choosing not to wear one doesn't make you better. This is still of course, you can have whatever opinion you want to have, but just on its face being wearing a collar makes you less than. Clearly that's the kind of comment that is intended to be hurtful, but it's just so plainly false that it kind of fails. The comment that's about oh, well, you just care too much about what other people think, that's way more cutting. That's a much better hate comment, in my opinion, because it is kind of true to a certain extent. Maybe that does say something about me. Maybe I do care too much about what other people think. Now, personally, my reaction, and I guess I'm actually reacting to this one now, even though I said I wouldn't originally, I have to say that for me, it really came down to a calculus of what I felt while wearing the collar versus not wearing it, and then also how stealthy I could be with it, and I just had too many uncomfortably close interactions in my personal life of people who seemed to know much more about what was going on with wearing collars than I thought was possible based on what was sold to me when it came to choosing to wear a collar. I thought, oh, no one's going to be able to notice, no one can tell, the vanillas, they just have no recognition of collars. Well, they do, and I didn't want to have to deal with that. Not because I didn't want just people to know that I was submissive, but because I didn't want to deal with people that could negatively impact my employment at the time, and people that were very aggressive in a way that made me feel unsafe, and I didn't want to have experiences with that went even a step farther into potentially unsafe territory. So that's my opinion on that, and I'm sticking to it, but you know, haters can have their own opinion. So the next one here is from a very recent video that I did on polyamory and polyamorous, in air quotes, people. Please stop doing this. And this person said, or maybe just stop centering your entire life around pleasure and be monogamous. You wouldn't have these problems. And for the record, in this video, many of these comments get a little bit spicy with the language, so instead of angering the YouTube gods, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace certain choice words with something in brackets that is like a pretty close substitute for that word, in my opinion. And I'm not trying to take anyone out of context in case like somebody whose comment I'm reacting to is watching this video right now, in which case, hello. I'm not trying to take you out of context. I am simply trying to not get in trouble with YouTube. And also, for the record, a lot of these comments were in my held for review section, which is basically YouTube jail. That's where comments go when YouTube is like, that used spam or too many emojis or had a bad naughty word in it. So if you're wondering where your comment went, it probably wasn't me like targetedly deleting your comments. It was probably because you swore too much, and then YouTube was like, oh no, that looks bad. YouTube jail. So just be aware of that. But anyways, the actual point of this comment, I find this interesting because it's sort of like, when you're a YouTuber, at least for me, because I'm a relatively small YouTuber by comparison to a lot of people that have this as their career, I generally interact with my comments as myself, with people like directing stuff to me. And so when somebody says you or like you're in the singular, it sounds like they're talking directly to me because it's my video. But I feel maybe they're trying to make a more general statement. I personally do not like overly focus on pleasure in my life. I do not have that as a problem. And I am confused also, you know, maybe to relate to the hate commenter a little bit. I also sometimes am puzzled by people that make pursuing certain intimate pleasures their entire life. Like I like doing stuff outside and gardening and playing with my dog and going for walks. Like I have hobbies and things I enjoy doing outside of just like trying to date as many people as possible. And I kind of find it funny that they are suggesting that like if you were just monogamous, you wouldn't have these problems, because these problems that I'm talking about in the video would be cheating mostly. Like I'm talking about cheating, and I'm talking about people trying to cover up their cheating with polyamory. But the funny thing is, being monogamous doesn't stop that problem, because the whole problem is people being in monogamous relationships and then somebody trying to make it polyamorous because they were cheating. Like they tried to do what you're saying to do, commenter, but it didn't work because somebody still cheated, because cheating happens in monogamy like it happens in polyamory. The other part of the video, which maybe could be more connected to this comment, though, like frankly, I don't know how long they watched my video for, so who even knows. But the other part of my video was talking about, I had many comments and reactions about this too, letting somebody know whether or not you're polyamorous before a first date. And lots of people did respond to me. This is sort of like a letters to the editor thing now, more so than just hate comments. But like I got a lot of people that were saying basically, oh, well, you know, I disagree with you. I know that what you're saying, Evie, is that it's always best to tell people up front that you're polyamorous, have it on your dating profile before you go on a first date, because, you know, what if you live in a small town, or, you know, it's really conservative where you live, and so you could lose your job if somebody sees you on a dating app and like it gets out that you're polyamorous. And to a certain extent, I get that. Like, I understand the need for discretion, but I think on the whole, like, if you're getting to the point where you're going on a first date, like, and if you tell somebody you're polyamorous, then I feel like it's more likely someone's gonna blow it up and be like, oh my god, you'll never believe it, I went on a date with Susie and she told me that she already has a boyfriend. Like, I feel like that's way more likely to blow up in a small town versus just like somebody seeing on a, like, if you're on Field, for example, which is really what I recommend to use for multi-person dating endeavors, to say it as generally as possible. I really feel like if most people are on that app, they're either looking to cheat, to hook up, or they're in some kind of open relationship or polyamory or kinky or what have you. So you're already in like a really small pool to begin with. And so if somebody sees you on there, it's kind of like seeing somebody at a dungeon where it's like, okay, we're both gonna agree to like never talk about this again. So it's sort of like mutually assured destruction. But you know, I get it if you're on like Bumble or Tinder, like even OkCupid, I get needing to have more discretion. But again, that's not a polyamory problem. Like, I guess if you're monogamous, okay, it is a polyamory problem, but it's not a problem because you're polyamorous. It's a problem with monogamous people not understanding polyamory and being grossed out by it. Like, yeah, if you were just monogamous, you would have less of a problem of people, you know, causing a fuss in your hometown because monogamy is expected. But like, then you're not really being true to who you are and what you want from relationships, and that sucks. And like, I feel like that's maybe not always worth it. Really just proving the point that I made in that video and in others I've made about polyamory, where I talk about how monogamous people and like culture as a whole is not accepting of open relationships or polyamory, and you know, it sucks. But you know what? This is a perfect example of how that kind of distrust and dislike of non-monogamous relationships happen. So thank you for the example. But next one here is, you may not know this, but BDSM isn't about money. Now this one was very out of the blue. That one just like whoosh, like it took me out of nowhere. I was like, what? Because this one was from a community post that I did where I advertised a class I was doing for SUBMISSIVES. Now, I will say, I can't say anything yet, but there may be more SUBMISSIVES online / possibly maybe in-person classes coming in the future. Can't say anything yet, but just, you know, have it on your radar. I was advertising a class about aftercare, and this person's like, you know, BDSM isn't about money. And I have a bone to pick with this mentality. Like, especially for that class, there was a sliding scale. There's scholarship opportunities, and lots of people took advantage of that. Like, if you couldn't afford to pay the full ticket price, you could pay less or potentially go for free. So, how is that? Like, this isn't a $2,000 e-course. Like, I'm not trying to sell you on how to make audiobooks for like really cheap on just like completely spam topics. Like, this takes effort and time to put together a 2-hour long class. I worked for multiple full days to make that class happen, and like, I deserve to be compensated for my labor. This is my full-time job. And one of the great dilemmas of the kink community is the fact that we do have, and this is largely beneficial, a community that has built itself on the power of volunteer labor and people just giving their free time away. However, if you do not compensate people with money, they will find a different way to compensate themselves. And sometimes it is purely altruistic and it's positive and it's good. And sometimes it's because people want power and influence to do bad things to other people. Don't really want to make it a super dark video here today, but there is certainly a tendency for people that are community organizers and class teachers and all of that to maybe not always be the best people in their relationships because, well, they use their fame and just Z-list local notoriety to be able to attract very, very young new people to play with them and to be in relationships with them because they have certain interests, okay? I don't want to get into it, but they have certain interests. So, yes, BDSM isn't about money, but I don't think it's unfair to occasionally be like, hey, if you want to see me deep dive into this very complicated topic, you can choose to pay me or not. It is optional. And a lot of people did, and it was a great class. So, sorry. Sometimes it is about money. But, like, yeah, you can do DIY kink at home for free. No one's stopping you. There are library books. You can watch all of my YouTube content. I have 700 YouTube videos. I have thousands of hours of my life, tens of thousands of hours of my life for free on YouTube that no one has to pay for. So, sorry about that, I guess. My bad. Whoops. Anyways, that's a very, personal thing for me. This one is kind of a novel. I'm gonna try my best to read it verbatim, but if I mess up, please forgive me. I'm not trying to say anything, make it go out of context, misstate anything maliciously. But just strap in for a second here for this one, okay? Because this is a really big, important one, I think. Very disappointed in your irresponsible take on 50 Shades. Just because it's not ruining the community doesn't make it harmless. This book needs no further role in kink culture in any way. Maybe there's worse erotica, but that doesn't mean 50 Shades doesn't romanticize a controlling relationship that's definitely toxic and arguably emotionally abusive. IMO, the biggest problem in the community is newbies' inability to easily identify toxic or fake doms. This book does nothing to help with that. Yes, there's worse representation, but we need better representation, period. Just because your hate of the book originally came from a vanilla perspective that disliked it for the wrong reasons doesn't mean that there aren't valid reasons to hate it. I've been in the community since before the movies came out, and I've seen so many newbies come in because of it that don't bother to educate themselves and end up in unhealthy situations because of it. And maybe as time goes on, the impact is less, but it's not suddenly harmless just because it doesn't have the same pop culture hold it once had. IMO, I don't think this book deserves any good or neutral press. I'm a bit baffled at you deciding to view it this way. You have been an influential kink YouTuber for years, and for years I have recommended your channel to any new kinksters, even vanilla people or ace kinksters, to learn about how not all kink is sexual. But this careless take really hurts my trust in your judgment going further on kink topics. I'm so disappointed. It continues, I hope that you'll see this comment and maybe realize your stance on 50 Shades matters because of your influence, and it's not harmless for you to be anything but the opinion that it encourages abusive kink. You don't need to hate the book, but how can you not acknowledge that? Yes, even vanilla culture is full of normalizing abusive romantic/sexual relationships, but should we want the kink community to be healthy? There's no denying that online and IRL, pretty much everywhere, toxic doms prey on young newbies, and this book is part of the problem. And encourage you to do a follow-up video on 50 Shades. Feel free to explain why the vanilla hate is unjustified, and this book is wrongfully scapegoated for many community issues. But a power dynamic relationship is already more vulnerable than a vanilla relationship. It is so easy for it to become abusive. I don't know anyone in the community who hasn't had at least one abusive experience with kink. I don't think it's because kinky people are more abusive, but that power exchange relationships require knowledge to be healthy and safe that vanilla society doesn't teach anyone. How are we as a community going to stop the prevalence of abuse? Where are people going to be educated on that? Please do better. The community needs influencers to criticize what this book normalizes. Okay, that was a long one, and firstly, I want to acknowledge that I think this comment comes from a good place. I believe this person is trying to advocate for the kind of influencer they want to see in the BDSM community, and part of that is having a sufficient critique of a very bad piece of supposed representation for the kink community. Like, it's important as an influencer, as a gateway into kink for new people, to be somebody who is going to talk about how 50 Shades of Grey is not a good piece of representation, that it is showing an abusive relationship, that it is not something to aspire to or use as a blueprint. And if you can't even do that, then like, why are you being a kink educator? You clearly don't know what you're talking about. And I think having that opinion and advocating for that is valid to a certain extent. However, I think possibly what happened here a little bit, maybe, is this person heard that my opinion, or they saw that my opinion was maybe softer than they were expecting and more neutral, and they took that in maybe a little bit more of an emotional way, where it is scary to think that somebody who's a really big influencer in the way that I am maybe doesn't have the right opinion about 50 Shades of Grey, because it does matter so much to so many people. So I don't know exactly what I said in that video, because this one was on my video where I talked about like kink opinions that I've changed over time. And I will play a clip if it ends up being useful here to demonstrate what I actually said in that video, because I don't think that what I was saying in that video is that 50 Shades itself is good representation or forgivable or like fine, or that people overreacted to how bad it was. Like, I'll play a clip and then you guys can be the judge of that. Because being an educator, I talk to so many people that are brand new to the kink scene. And looking at this more in the long term, I think probably within the first 5 years of 50 Shades being out, you know, getting into the movies and stuff, that was really the peak of people discovering kink through that. But as I've said, it all comes out in the wash. And there were people who went to Lovers and got a faux leather paddle and tried it once and never again because they hated it. There are people who started to go to parties because of it and then maybe didn't always behave super well. I'm not saying it never happened, that there weren't people who entered into the scene that then, you know, caused some problems. I'm not saying that that never ever happened, but I'm saying it was a lot less common and it wasn't quite as long of a problem as maybe some people are making it out to be, because I think it's very easy to look at that and go, oh, that's the problem. It's the 50 Shades. It's not our understanding of good consent is changing, and things that used to be okay are not any longer, or people are getting outed for bad behavior that used to be protected. No, it's the books that are the problem. And it's like, eventually we gotta stop using 50 Shades of Grey as this eternal shield from introspection, where as a community we're not evaluating our problems because we have this very big boogeyman. And you know, Zoomers who are 18 that are entering the scene right now out of high school or when they're getting into college, they're not coming in because they read 50 Shades of Grey because it came out when they were in elementary school. The people that are in the scene now that got in because of 50 Shades, I think by and large, they are people that immediately saw the stuff online about 50 Shades of Grey being a bad representation and toxic and negative, and they were able to come into the community, educate themselves, realize and separate fantasy from reality, and that book is a book. And you know what? I gotta be honest. They're all great kinksters as far as I know. But just to make my point very crystal clear in terms of what I was trying to say in that video and what my actual opinion was. Although I do find it funny that in this comment, they're basically like, well, just because you were vanilla at the time and you had the wrong reasons for disliking the book because of that, you know, that doesn't mean there's not reasons to hate it. And I'm not saying that you can't hate the books or that you should like them. I find it funny that just because it was vanilla in like 2013 mean that I disliked the books for the wrong reasons, or the vanilla people disliked that book for the wrong reasons. Like, I don't know what y'all saw, but what I was exposed to at the time before I was kinky was that People made fun of it because it was very poorly written, yes, but there were extensive articles and YouTube videos made about how, even to vanilla people, they could see that this was demonstrating an abusive relationship and that was bad to have in popular fiction as a blueprint for other people's relationships to follow because of how hot and steamy it was. And I think that some people who were vanilla took that into all BDSM is gross and bad and wrong, and this shows why BDSM is gross and bad and wrong. However, that was never an opinion I really interacted with, even before I was kinky, when I was still vanilla. So I can't say that's like the dominant reason why people disliked it, nor do I think that vanilla people are incapable of disliking 50 Shades of Grey for like the right reasons. However, my opinion did go through an evolution as I went from vanilla to kinky to who I am today. And when I was getting involved in the kink scene, I started to very strongly and vocally dislike it. I hated those books, and I was very open about it. I would harp on and on to anyone who would listen about how they were toxic and they were negative for the community and they were damaging it, and that it represented an abusive relationship, and that it was like the worst book ever written. However, just because I've softened on that opinion doesn't mean that I suddenly think that 50 Shades is a good book or shouldn't ever be criticized. Like, I'm not trying to rehabilitate 50 Shades of Grey. My point in that video was to say I think we sort of treated it like, oh my god, this guy is falling, it's the worst thing that ever happened to the community, and like we all panicked about it as a community, and we talked about it to death. Like with the YouTube videos and the think pieces and the articles and the blogs, and the community talks about it. Like, we had so much dialogue about how it was a bad book that by this point in this day and age, you cannot Google 50 Shades of Grey without there being 100 opinions about why it's a bad book, why it doesn't represent BDSM. Like, the work has been done. If you research 50 Shades of Grey at all, or just Google it, you will find numerous, uncountable numbers of critical articles and opinions about the book, the author, the series, all of that stuff. It was very popular both in mainstream media and in the kink community to criticize the ever-loving crap out of that book series. So my point isn't that we shouldn't have criticized it to that degree, but that the criticism is so ubiquitous that maybe we can relax a little bit on harping about it so much as a community. Like, maybe we can now move from blaming it for every problem onto like really assessing what's going on in our community. Like, my point was that we criticized it so heavily for so long that it became embedded as this go-to scapegoat for the community to avoid assessing its own problems. Like, Munch stops happening? Well, it's because too many 50 Shades of Grey wannabes started to show up. Dungeon closed, convention no longer happening, it's because of those dang 50 Shades of Grey newbies. Abuse happening in the community? Well, that can't be because we have long-standing issues over the course of decades in this community in regards to consent and leadership and authority. No, it has to be because those newbie 50 Shades of Grey lovers are making it worse. It wasn't that we had our own long-standing issues beforehand, it was them who came in and ruined our perfect community. And there are people that I see all the time on FetLife, on forums, in comment sections that pretend like 20, 30 years ago we didn't have these issues, and now we suddenly do, and it's because of the 50 Shades and the ilk that brought with it. How dare they enter our community spaces? And as I said in the video, there are people who get into the community because of 50 Shades of Grey, and I don't know any of them that are bad actors that have mistreated people. Most of them are very conscientious, nervous, eager newbies that want to learn the right way to do things, that know it's bad representation because of how ubiquitous the criticism already is. And so I just want us to not use it as a cardboard cutout for convenience's sake whenever we don't want to analyze our own problems. I think it's fine to critique it. I think it's fine to point out that it's bad. I don't think it's good representation. I think that when I say that my opinion has softened, I just mean that I don't want to fire blast it all over the internet that it's the worst book ever, because I have read many pieces of erotica that purport to actually represent the community, not just relationships, but the community, that do certain things even worse than 50 Shades of Grey does. They happen to be less popular and less influential, but they are not necessarily better just because they aren't 50 Shades of Grey. So I guess, have I made my point clear? I really want to make sure this is clear. I don't like 50 Shades of Grey. I don't think it's good representation. I don't think anyone should be using it as a blueprint for their relationships. I do think that it does demonstrate an unhealthy, toxic, abusive relationship. And my ultimate opinion on the back of that is, we have talked about how bad it is to death and back. Almost everyone who enters into the community now isn't doing so because of 50 Shades of Grey, and we need to be able to self-reflect as a community to change, rather than using a novel that's a decade old as a permanent excuse for all of the community's problems. That's really the long and the short of it. I'm just tired of having to performatively hate 50 Shades of Grey whenever it gets mentioned, because if I don't do that, people assume that I like it. No, I don't like 50 Shades of Grey. I just can't be bothered to hate it with a burning passion in a vocal way that often whenever it comes up. Most people who enter the community that are younger people, they are doing it not because of 50 Shades, because when it came out, they were in elementary school. They're too young to use it as a point of reference. I think if we want to blame anything for newbie bad actors in the community, the thing to look to is social media. It's TikTok. It's Discord groups. It's things where people are not getting and giving accurate information about the kink scene, and they are perpetuating maybe misconceptions about it because it's the blind leading the blind. I think that has demonstrably had way more effects in terms of who's entering into the community, the knowledge they come into the community with, versus 50 Shades of Grey. But that's my opinion, right? You don't have to like the book, you don't have to dislike it, you can have whatever opinion you want to have, and the constant need for a firestorm about it in this performative way is, I think, maybe a bit overdone. Maybe we can move on from that as a community. Anyways, I spent a very, very long time reacting to this one comment, so hopefully I thoroughly covered my opinion. And I also will say, because I haven't said this yet, I have videos where I've talked about 50 Shades of Grey before in detail. I have reacted to all of the videos and talked about how bad and terrible they are. I did a script doctor video where I changed it to make it better and not be abusive and terrible and awful. So let's move on to another much shorter comment now. This one is very, very simple and to the point. Because the entire idea of CNC is just plain stupid. WTF is wrong with people. And this one was on the video that I did about CNC. It was a Reddit story about CNC gone wrong. And the simplicity of it is just, it's so good. It's just it's bad because it's stupid. It's just an old school internet comment. I love it. No, you're wrong because you're dumb. And it's okay, no, of course CNC isn't stupid. I get disliking the concept. I get that it is something you would maybe not personally find fulfilling or intriguing. However, it's not stupid. I think the reasons why people like CNC are very well understood, valid, they're coherent, they're cogent, they make sense. I understand why people like CNC. It's not just stupid. It is high risk, but just because something is high risk doesn't mean it's dumb. So, no, it's not. It's not stupid. But I don't know. Okay, so the next two I'm going to read together, and they are both on my video that is responding/reacting to Blaire White talking about trans age people. So strap in for this one as well, I suppose. The first one says, LOL, the irony of you saying Blaire, spelled incorrectly, is over-dramatizing things, while at the same time you admit to not doing much of any research and being nowhere near an expert on the topic. And then like laughing, crying emoji. Actually, I am going to break these two up because this one I think I want to respond to separately. So this one is just wrong. Like, I never said I didn't do any research. What I said is that I wasn't an expert in what being trans age meant, because I'm not an expert. Like, I did research. I have 6 pages, single-spaced, of notes just on that part of the video, and it was quite extensive, the research I did. However, that research didn't necessarily glean a lot of information because it's not really that like big of a thing. And I'm definitely more of an expert about it than Blaire is, because I talk about kink for a living. I know lots about age play and age regression and DDLG and CGL and all of that, which is what Blaire was actually reacting to 99% of the time in her video. The people that she was talking about or showing on screen were not even trans age. They were people that were kinky or were doing age play, and like that I am an expert in. So until anyone can show me more concrete information about what trans age is, I think I'm about as much of a subject matter expert on being trans age as anyone else could be, when it's not even really that big of a thing. Like, I read everything I could about it to make that video, to make sure I was making a really strong point. And also, like, maybe people on the internet don't understand this. There's a huge middle ground between knows nothing at all about a topic and is a full-on expert about it. Like, you can know a little bit about something, or a lot about something, or know a ton about something, but still not be an expert. Like, an expert is like the end point of like the peak of knowledge, and I don't have necessarily the peak possible knowledge about trans age as there could be, but I know quite a lot. I did quite a lot of research. I don't have to be an expert to have my opinion be a YouTube video. Like, I'm not trying to give a paid lecture at a university. I don't have to be an expert to be able to talk about something if it's my YouTube channel and it's just an opinion. So no, I'm not an expert. I said that because I'm not one, because no one is, because this topic is barely even in existence. It's like, it's what information is out there is very scant. Like, it's just silly. So it's silly. No, I'm not an expert. That doesn't mean my opinion is worthless. So, like, you played yourself, I guess? Like, okay, fine. Anyways, next one here. Oh, this one, I like this one because it really just, it tells you what people are really thinking. This one says, this is a whole bunch of kink information that all of us vanilla DGAF about. It's just a freak show presentation Blaire is using to make fun of the left. Only those who think kink shaming is a real thing take this seriously, facepalm. And I love this one because, like I said, it just really tells you. It really tells you what's going on there, doesn't it? Like, the veil has been lifted. There is no pretense about this being a sounding alarm for potential problems for trans acceptance or whatever. Like, no, this is a freak show. We like watching the freak show. Stop trying to interrupt our fun parade. We like it. Yeah, no, okay, like, it's sure, for Blaire and all you other people who like her, not all of them, there's people, we have audience overlap apparently, but some people who watch Blaire because they want to crap on the left, and they want to make fun of the freak show, like, okay, fine, that is what you're doing. And I guess, yeah, if you don't want to have information about what kink actually is and you want to make fun of people using a label they don't actually even use for themselves, fine, okay, be inaccurate, make fun of something inaccurately, that you can do that, but you're wrong. Like, if you make fun of somebody for being trans age, but they don't claim to be trans age, they're just kinky, that's false. That's a false critique. That is a false reason for publicly just, I don't know, like, it's just, this frustrates me because it's like, okay, you can make fun of somebody for the wrong reasons if you want to, but doesn't that kind of make you a bad person for wanting to do that? Like, if you don't care who you're making fun of or how accurate it is or not because you just like making fun of the freaks, like, I don't think that, to me at least, in my values, it doesn't make somebody a good person if you want to do that. So, okay, thanks for sharing with the class what your real inner thoughts actually are, because a lot of people just try to cloak it in like respectability or worry about the trans community. So like, thanks for being direct, I suppose. Anyways, I feel like by saying all this stuff, I'm kind of just inviting more strong opinions and more hate comments. It's part of being a YouTuber. You don't have to like me, you don't have to agree with me, you don't have to think that I'm a good representation for the kink community, you don't have to think that I'm allowed to speak on J fashion subcultures or whatever, or polyamory. Like, you can have whatever opinion about me you want to have. I'm just me. I'm just here making YouTube videos. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with everything I say or how I say it or any of that stuff. Just be respectful and be kind. And I would love to know y'all's thoughts in a comment down below. I don't know how good a job I've done of like making sure my opinion is super clear, because if somebody already understands you incorrectly or doesn't like you, I feel like it's so much harder to make sure you are accurately being seen. But also, like, I can't make you see me the way that I see myself. Like, we all have our own versions of who other people are in our own heads that are probably different from how that person is to themselves. And like, I can't control that, and you gotta just let it go. So if you still don't like me, fine. If you don't like my opinions, fine. I have tried my best to explain them. If further clarification is needed, feel free to sound off in a comment down below and let me know what you think about all of this. I am so curious to hear y'all's opinion. If you did like this and are ready, please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of different kink and BDSM related topics that give you an opportunity to let me know what you think about what I'm saying in those videos. And also, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is with Patreon. A link to that will be down below. If you do already support me over there, thank you so, so much. It means absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.